What is up, nerd friends? Welcome back to the Nerd Bench. This week, I got a brand new truck. First and foremost, shout out to Brandon over at Vanquish. I sent him a magical email. I said, hey, I really would like to have one of those new Vanquish Phoenix RTRs that you guys have. And he said, sure thing, Charlie, no problem. And then second shout out to Sharif over at Reefs for dialing me in on a servo. He gave me a bunch of other servos, so we'll get into that later. For now, I just put the steering servo in. This is the Phoenix RTR that is kind of new from Vanquish. It's they've had the Phoenix out for a while, but they do it as an RTR version. And I gotta say, I am very impressed. This is an RTR that comes ready for adding a shift servo and an overdrive servo. These do not come installed in the RTR, but it does come with this pretty sweet radio that has enough buttons and features to support the core features of this. So I upgraded the servo, like I said, with a Reefs steering servo. I took the stock servo and I put that as the shift servo, and then I had another RTR stock servo that I slapped in as my overdrive servo. I also pulled out the stock electronics and I installed the Fusion SE. But the radio itself is pretty straightforward. It's got a 3-position toggle switch here that has a rear, center, and front position, and then it's got another button here. And you can set this guy up to change gears in the overdrive. It'll do, I want to say, a 5% overdrive or a 45% overdrive. Don't quote me on those numbers. But that means that you can make the front tires spin faster than the rear and have control over how much faster they go. And there's also a dig servo in here that does the transmission locking the rear axle like a parking brake, or you can run rear wheel neutral, so it just disengages the drive completely in your front wheel drive only, or it has normal 4-wheel drive as well. Pretty cool stuff. I pulled out the stock brush motor system after driving it zero amount of time, and I put in a brand new Fusion SE 1800 with the stock gearing, and it's about perfect for a scaler. I like it a lot. But what we're going to talk about today is the settings of the Fusion SE and the basic setup of all of this. So let's say you get this installed. And to install this setup, like a lot of the scalers these days, it's pretty hard to get to the motors. And this one's pretty straightforward. You take your battery tray off, and then there's like 5 or 6 screws down in here that let the whole transmission slide out. You got to take the gear cover off. You can swap out the motor pretty easy. They have, I want to say it's an 11 or a 12 tooth pinion gear on there. Again, don't quote me, but whatever that is, I left that alone for the Fusion 1800. If I had a 1200 kV Fusion, I might go up a tooth or two. It just depends on how much wheel speed you're looking for. But with this 1800, it's just about the right speed. So you get your Fusion set up, installed, and one of the things that you're going to have to do is the calibration process so that your new Fusion can learn the throttle output of your radio. And we're going to walk through that real simple calibration right now. You start with the speaker or the radio turned on. You want to make sure that if you are doing this on a different radio or something that's not this, that you make sure your travel on your brakes and your throttle are at least 100% as far as endpoints or travel adjustments. Some radios, you can turn the brakes down with some buttons that are down here, and that'll make it not be able to calibrate the brake side. So with the radio on, you plug the battery in. The button for this is right here, and we'll move this just a little bit so we can see the light better, because it is part of the process. But it's a long press and hold, and then we'll walk through that. So calibration of the Fusion SE. Long press and hold. Starts to blink, you let go. You get that rapid blink, you tap it to set neutral. Full throttle and hold. Tap it to set full reverse and hold, tap it. It beeps once, twice, 3 times as you go through each of those taps, and then it gets done, and that is the basic calibration process. That'll give you your forward and reverse. Now, what's very, very common in today's cars is that, or rock crawlers in particular, is that when you go to give it throttle, this one's already been set up, the wheels will turn backwards. And a lot of us are going to try to reverse the radio to correct that, and that is not the right way to do it. You want to change the motor rotation setting in your Fusion so that it's using forward is forward, reverse is reverse. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it does help with the resolution of a few things. And more so, it's a bad practice to get into because people have been doing it for a very long time. I still talk to folks on the phone every day that are changing the radio to get the motor rotation correctly, and that's just not the way you want to do it. On a brushless setup that has a motor rotation setting, you definitely want to do it that way. Now, the Fusion SE does not include a programming card, and it does not have any built-in tuning that you can do with the button and the lights. So if you want to make setting changes, you're going to need one of these LED program cards. It actually doesn't matter which one you use. These boxes are all the same. They just come with different stickers on them, and they simply display what is inside the speed control's brain. So if your sticker doesn't say your speed control's name on it, just get your instruction manual out and use the instruction manual's chart. It has a setting chart in there to tell you what the display numbers are going to mean. The Fusion SE has the same settings as the original Fusion does. So there's 9 settings, and they're all exactly the same as they were previously. On any of the Fusions, the programming port is on the end of the switch. You start with the speed control turn off, and it is marked on the end of the switch for which things go where. There's a little squiggly symbol and a plus and a minus. That's for the color code of the wires. Once you get that plugged in, turn the speed control on, and then the numbers come on, and we can get right into it. So, setting number 1 is your throttle matching. You can enable or disable that, and that kind of controls the FOC's one-to-one relation. With that enabled, you're going to get very fixed one-to-one throttle response when you're getting on and off the throttle. Probably the best thing for normal scale or trail driving. If you're going to do more kind of cruising around high-speed stuff, you might want to disable that. It's going to decelerate a little bit different. I always leave mine enabled. Next up is LiPo cells, and you can set it to auto, 2-cell, or 3-cell. I always leave it on auto in case I want to run a 2-cell. The speed control is not going to lock me out of that. Your cutoff voltage is how much runtime you get, and you can see there's low, intermediate, and high. And low is low voltage, intermediate is like a middle voltage, and then high is a high voltage. And I get asked all the time what voltage is at, and it's going to vary a little bit depending on the health of the batteries, temperatures, how long they got run, the C ratings, lots of fun stuff like that. But for the most part, low is like a 3.3 per cell range. Intermediate's probably closer to like 3.5, and then high is probably going to be 3.7. And again, you're not going to see that every time because of how long the battery sits before you check the voltage has an effect on what those numbers are going to be. So it gets a little misleading, but lower is more runtime, higher is less runtime, safer, so to speak. So that's the easy way to look at it. Number 4, ESC thermal protection. Hope we all know what that is. There's a temperature protection built into it that'll save the speed control from being overheated and causing damage. You can turn that up or down or turn it off even, and I obviously don't recommend that. And then the next setting, number 5, that's the motor rotation. And you can see we have that set for this rig to counterclockwise, so that forward is forward, reverse is reverse. Pretty straightforward there. If your vehicle, if you give it throttle and the wheels turn backwards, you're going to change this setting. That's the one you're looking for, is motor rotation. Up next, number 6, your BEC voltage. This controls the power output to the receiver and the servos. If you run high voltage servos, you can bump that up. If not, you're going to leave that alone. Now, your drag brake force is how strong the neutral brakes are, how strong your rock crawl brakes are. When you let off the throttle, it applies brakes. That's what this setting is. The higher this is, the stronger your brakes are going to be. The lower it is, the weaker they're going to be. I tend to always run mine a little bit lower because I don't mind the little rollback and stuff like that. Most of the things that we do, we're not super into counting reversers or any of that. Now, the next one is a lot of fun. Drag brake rate has to do with how quickly the speed control applies the brakes when it goes to stop you. And I like to turn this all the way down because it's going to be the slowest and the smoothest. So if you're driving along in a clip, you let off the throttle, this applies the brakes nice and slow for you. If you like to have them very snappy and responsive, come on quickly, you turn that setting up, obviously. And then last setting, number 9, is our max reverse force. Some folks are not very good at using reverse, so turning this down makes reverse a little bit smoother because pushing the trigger is kind of less intuitive than squeezing the trigger. So you can control your reverse force with this one. And then one thing to note is if you do make any changes, you have to hit OK to save. Otherwise, none of your changes are going to stay in the speed control. You can do it at the end or you can do it between each setting. Doesn't really make any difference, but you want to make sure that you press OK to save. So that covers the basics of what the settings do in your Fusion SE, or if you have the old Fusion. Oh, so I noticed in the comments, somebody asked me they like when you do the full throttle just to get a reference of how fast it is. So here's this is the 1800, like I said, stock gearing in the stock Phoenix RTR, but there's a full throttle blast for you. And that's with the overdrive on. Let me turn the overdrive off. You see the servo shift? The front wheels are slower now. Maybe you can or can't tell. I can tell sitting here. And then here's that sweet dig operation. So that's 4-wheel drive. If I go there, it's neutral now. So you got coaster in the back. And if you go all the way forward, that's a brake in the back. So for like pivot turns and stuff like that, Very cool. But again, thanks to Vanquish Products and Reefs for hooking us up with the truck, and Reefs for hooking us up with the servo. There will be links for both of them down in the description below, of course. And as I like to do, I remind everybody we do have a podcast each and every month. We have 2 episodes, the first and third Friday of the month. Check it out on your favorite podcast service. It's called RC Stuff, powered by Hobbywing. We give away a free system each and every episode. So all you have to do to find out how to win is listen to an episode, and you'll get the details on that. So I invite you to check that out. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Another fresh episode of The Charlie Show, new every Tuesday right here on the Hobbywing official YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.